We're going to go ahead and start the announcements and business portion of the Mono Basin Historical Society. Okay, if everyone can hear us, please give us a thumbs up so we know that we're good. We're good in the room. Let's see. Okay, and then does it sound like we're okay? So we're all okay? Okay. So we're just going to go ahead and start, and we'll have our program start at 6:30. So those of you that are not here, you're and are on Zoom, you're missing a wonderful potluck. There is a lot of really nice looking food over there. So hopefully all of you folks at home are able to get some nice goodies as well. So we're just going to go right ahead and start into our announcements and report. So I wanted to let you all know that we did receive the Mono County Historical Society's grant this year, and it was awarded for about $1,800, and that is for us to purchase supplies for repairs and maintenance on the museum grounds and our historical buildings. We need to purchase the supplies by June 30th. We don't have to use them until later in the summer, but we just have to have the receipts for the county by June 30th. So that was really great. And we've also completed the grant application for the SCE grant. And that is for the request was for $5,000. We have not heard back yet from them. I don't believe we'll hear back from them until at least May. And we're sure hoping for that because that really helps us out. We have a conflict. July 1st meeting is the first Monday of the month is July 4th. So should we move the meeting to July 5th, which is the first Tuesday of the month? And I'm looking for, those of you online, if you can give us thumbs up, thumbs down, if that would work. Can you see that, Rich?
We only have a few that are sharing their screen, but we all have thumbs up. Chris Spiller, did you want to share something on screen?
And for the folks in the room, would the first Tuesday of the month, July 5th, be okay? Okay. Okay.
Chris Spiller has asked for all of the screen for Chris.
Are you there, Chris? You think she really means it?
Oh, sorry, I was muted. Yeah, what was the question? Because
I got a message that Chris Spiller is requesting remote control of your screen. Is that a spurious request?
I'm having a hard time hearing Rich.
Okay. Sorry. I have a message that you requested remote control of the screen. You wanted to share something?
No, I was fighting with my computer because it wouldn't go to smaller than a quarter of the screen. So I must have hit something. No, I'm not requesting that.
Okay.
Thank you.
They're a passing fad.
All righty. So does it look like a consensus with the thumbs up that we'd be okay? Okay, so then the meeting for July 5th will be on Tuesday. And I know that I tend to make some typos in my emails. So I'll just be sure to make a note on the July meeting that it truly is on Tuesday. And then our hybrid meetings that we're doing tonight, like the in-person and Zoom, we have a bit of a conflict in May and June. Rich and Kathy are going to be out of town. And as we all know, Rich is our audio-visual technical guru, but he is going to train Dave, Carl, and I to run the Zoom and the recording and the camera. So hopefully we'll do all right here. Because we've had many comments from folks out of town, how important it is to them to keep the meetings going Zoom. And so that is our intention to do. And so we are going to do our best without Rich. And one of the emails that I had received saying, please keep up the June or the Zoom meetings as well. The lady, and I'm sorry, I can't remember her name right now, she ended her email with, "Thank God for Rich Foy." And I thought that was just awesome. And so you may really be, we're going to be going, "Rich, where are you?" in May and June, but we'll make it happen. We'll make it happen. So I wanted to let you all know that we had a fundraiser meeting, and that was attended by Dave Carl, Janice Mendez, Chris Spiller, Rich and Kathy Foy, Linda LaPierre, and Chris and Lenore Toomey. I think I got everybody. The fundraisers that we've got on the book so far are Earth Day cleanup. And, you know, we have a stretch of the highway, and I believe it's just this year that Caltrans actually pays us to clean up our stretch of the highway. They pay us $250. I don't know. I think you have to look to see if there is a sign available, but I can let you know because I've got to talk to Randy this week anyway, and I'll ask him. So we've planned for Earth Day, which is April 22nd, and Janet Carl is heading up this endeavor, and she wants people to meet up at the pavilion at 1 p.m. on Earth Day, April 22nd. She would like us to check in with her and let her know that we are coming. And if anyone needs Janet's email, it is carljanet@gmail.com. And that's CARLE Janet @gmail.com. The next activity we've got going is the Early Birders Breakfast to go along with the Mono Lake Committee's Bird Chautauqua that takes place June 17th through the 19th. And the 18th is when we have traditionally done the Birders Breakfast, is on Saturday. And we're super happy to bring that back now that the pandemic seems to be calming a little bit, and the committee is bringing an in-person Chautauqua back. So we have two new members, Lenore and Chris Toomey, and they are new to the Mono Basin, and they have graciously volunteered to coordinate that breakfast. So we're very happy for that. And anyone that would like to help or to donate food for the breakfast, they can email curator@monobasinhistory.org, and I'll get it to Lenore because I can't remember her email address. Let's see. And then July 23rd, we're going to have the second annual Artists and Ice Cream event. And Priscilla did an awesome job on that last year. It was a lot of fun. And we're going to combine it with our first ever Indian taco sale. So Priscilla is going to handle the coordination for the Artists and Ice Cream event, and Janice Mendez is going to coordinate the Indian taco sale. The Indian taco sale is going to take place here at the community center, and then the Artists and Ice Cream will be at the museum and the park and the pavilion area. So we figure we'll get people coming and going, and we should raise a lot of money that way. So we're really excited about that. And Priscilla, did you want to say anything about the Artists and Ice Cream? Okay.
Hello, this is Priscilla. What I love about this Artists and Ice Cream is that we're fundraising for one thing, but also we are honoring and getting to meet some of the artists in our county. And then we have ice cream that we can eat. So we have ice cream sundaes. So it's all great fun. And also, we'll have some live music like we did last year. I'll probably be doing some playing, but other people in the community also came and played. And we had a great turnout. We didn't charge people anything, but we got a lot in donations. So I think that's the way we're going to go again this year. So plan on being in town on the 23rd of July. It's a Saturday. Thank you.
Thank you. This should be a lot of fun. And yes. I will. Absolutely. Absolutely will. Okay. And then August 26th and 27th is the dates for the 18th annual Ghost Tour. And Dave Carl has once again agreed to coordinate the event. And oh my gosh, are we ever appreciative to that? This is our, as you know, our biggest fundraiser. It takes a lot of planning and coordination. And I just think that Dave has it down, and he does such an awesome job, and we just appreciate it so much. The theme this year, we're going to honor the 100th anniversary of the schoolhouse. So our old schoolhouse was originally erected 100 years ago. So the theme's going to be around education in the Mono Basin and the schoolhouses. So that's just sort of a little teaser, because I'm sure that Dave will come up with a really jazzy title that I don't have. Unless, Dave, have you already come up with one?
Nope, I'm sorry. Well, I'll work on that soon.
That's okay. I figured that you said the whole month of April you were busy, but I thought, well, we better just check just in case. We're hoping the dinner we can still have at the Mono Inn. There may be a date conflict, and Hillary's going to get back to me and confirm that here shortly. And if there is a conflict, we'll work it out. We've got other alternatives. The other thing that we discussed at the meeting was Chris Spiller had an idea to do a walking tour of Lee Vining, and Chris offered to coordinate it and put the materials together, but we would need volunteers to actually walk around and do the tour. Hey, Chris, did you want to say anything about that?
Okay. Yeah, I've kind of just loosely got an idea, and I know this has been done before. In fact, I think it was done for a ghost a few years back. But it seems like we could do something really easy by starting at the Schoolhouse Museum. There's some history there. And now we have that wonderful solar pavilion, which is full of historical information and its history in itself that was done by the community. And just my loose route is crossing the street, and going down, kind of making a loop around and kind of coming back the same way. One problem I have is I also am a tour guide for the Bodie Foundation, and I already got 10 tours booked this year. So I would be willing to do some of the tours, but I can't do them all. And I guess the question to decide is how much we want to do it. Is it once a month? 3 times in the summer, and would we charge for it? Because I think that we could get some donations for it. I think people would be willing to pay something for a little tour of the town. So ideas, I'm looking for that, and people.
Yes, Rebecca.
I remember helping with that. And so I don't know if it's Dave Carl perhaps has the script that, not that you would, she's got it. So, because why reinvent it?
Oh, yeah. I found an article in the sheet that talked about the event, but it's not really, it did talk about where they went. So, yeah, that'd be great.
Okay, so if anyone is interested in doing that, Chris, can I give out your email address?
Sure.
Okay, we would, and I'll put this in some bullet points and send it out as well.
Okay.
Chris's email is Chris, CHRIS, CAV Spiller at outlook.com. And speaking of Chris, I just wanted to make sure that everyone looks at the MBHS Facebook on Thursdays. Chris does our Throwback Thursday, and they're just amazing. And I love seeing the comments that people have back and forth. And it's quite a commitment that she's made to us to be able to do this. So I just wanted to put a shout out to Chris, and so everyone knows that there is someone behind the scenes there that's making all of that happen, and we sure appreciate it. Let's see, we have.
Guys, could I say something?
You betcha.
Oh, thank you. I was wondering about trying to do this town tour for some of the school classes before school gets out. To ask teachers if they would be allowed to, walk out of the classroom with us and do some of the, show the kids talk to the kids some about what the town's history is.
That would be neat. Maybe get the kids more interested in our local history as well. I bet they do not know that there was an elephant in Lee Vining.
That's right.
Lily Matthew would know that there was a elephant in Lee Vining. That's got to be a good story.
Yeah, I think it was right. The circus was, I think I read it was around where the Chevron station is now. That sound right, Dave?
Huh, that's great.
I don't know, but the person, one besides you, Chris, a person I had in mind to ask about that tour for the children is Susan Desmaillet.
It's funny, Dave. I wrote Susan's name down on my notes. So I'll reach out to her, or Kristie, if I'll get with you and see if you've got her contact information.
Yeah, I don't know if I've got an email for Susan or not. I might.
Okay.
I'm sure somebody does.
Okay. And then we need some help. We've got Duncan and Ellen King have been our co-secretaries for many years, and we greatly appreciate all the work that they have done. But they also do a lot of work for a lot of organizations around, and they have a life too. And some of them some of that life is in England. So they've stepped down, and so we're looking for someone to take minutes for our meetings. Now we do have, with the Zoom recordings, we have them recorded, but it's still, I think we're still supposed to have minutes on paper. So if anyone would like to take minutes for these meetings, we'd sure appreciate it, and either reach out to myself or to the curator. I think even folks that are at home on the Zoom, they could take minutes and then just send them over to us. So it might be something that somebody that's home could do them, and we'd sure appreciate it. The other help we need is a membership coordinator. And this consists of keeping the MBHS membership and donors lists up to date, sending out the thank you letters to the donors, and we really need somebody to take on this task. I'm doing it currently, and I feel like I am not doing anything well because I'm doing too much. And so if someone would be willing to take that on, I'd sure appreciate it, and just reach out. I'd be ever so grateful. The other is we are looking for a paid coordinator for the museum. And so this would be our one paid position, and we don't pay much, but it's a lot of fun, and to work at the museum 3 or 4 days a week. We have reached out to we've got a couple of irons in the fire. Bob Marks is a wealth of information. It seems like Bob talks to people and they just give him info. and it's awesome. And so we're hoping to find someone. It may be that we need to find two people, depending on what's going on. But if you're interested in that, again, email the curator email address, and I can send you the job description, that sort of thing. And let's see, we are at 6:28. So we're going to be starting this program here in just a little bit. And I just want to tell you a little bit about Cole. Cole's going to be presenting this evening, Food in the Mono Basin After 1850. And Cole Hawkins is going to be giving us this presentation. And Cole is our vice president. He's also worked at the museum since 2011. He worked many of those years with Norm DeChambeau. And I think they became close friends. I don't know if you completely did the Vulcan mind meld, but you learned a lot, I think, from just being around Norm. You end up hearing all sorts of stories, and I'm sure it was great fun those years with him. So Cole holds degrees in history, biology, wildlife, and fisheries. So he's got a lot of varied interests and a lot of knowledge. And I think he's done a lot of research for this presentation, and we're sure looking forward to it. So, Cole. And there you go.
You? Oh, it's not flat.
One
Well,
hand, two
Too
feet.
bad for that. I'll just put this up here and spill it in your stuff. Okay, are we on?
Should be on.
Okay. Hi, I make a comment. Robin mentioned that I talked a lot with Norm, and one of Norm's big things that he always repeated was, you got to take everything that's written down with a grain of salt, because a lot of it was written down by people who remembered what their father told them. And I found that to be very true. And Norm even said, some of the stuff I tell you, you have to take with a grain of salt. And things like that are going to come up in this talk. There are a few spelling problems. Some of them are probably my fault, but some of them in the records, the same name will be spelled 2 or 3 different ways. And I didn't necessarily get those all ironed out, and some of them there's no way to do it. So I'm going to talk about food in the Mono Basin after 1850. And I'm going to Okay, I'm going to start with early mining camp food. And if any of you have been to the Crocker Art Museum in Sacramento, you may have seen this picture. It's been a favorite of mine for years, and it's by Charles Christian Nall, and it's called Sunday Morning in the Mines. I doubt that Sunday morning in any of the mines were ever quite this idyllic, but in this picture, there's a pot by the fire and some tin cups, and there's some onions or garlic hanging in the door. But I like the picture, and one of the reasons I'm showing it is because about half the color in the entire presentation is in the first slide and this one. So it's going to be a black and white presentation. Early mining camp food, when the first miners, the founders arrived, it was extremely basic. It was pretty much food that wouldn't spoil rapidly. So things like bacon spoiled very slowly. It's still spoiled, but bacon, flour, beans, sugar, coffee, and once the mines got going and it looked like they were going to be profitable and there was money to be made, then entrepreneurs and teamsters and things would start bringing in food and supplies. And they, for the Mono Basin area, they mainly came from Virginia City, Genoa, and occasionally from Visalia. But they also came from, I think, Thorn, Nevada, and Smith Valley, and a few other places. I have to remember to keep clicking. One of the first established towns, so to speak, in the Mono Basin was Monoville. It had 150 people overwintering in 1859. There were a lot more miners there during the summer, but the winters were pretty rough, and a lot of the miners commuted. They would go back to the east side, the west side, for the winter. The cost of living here and in many of the mining camps was quite a bit higher than places like Sacramento, San Francisco, mainly because of the weather and the transportation. And those two often worked together to bring things to a grinding halt. In 1860, provisions were brought from Visalia. Oh, my goodness. Were brought from Visalia, again, whiskey, flour, bacon, just the essentials. Cattle was driven, so meat arrived on the hoof. In 1860 and 1860, there were 2 butcher shops in Monoville, and eggs from the islands in Mono Lake were sold. In 1861, there were 2 markets in Monoville and a bakery. So things were really starting to move in the Mono Basin. I'm going to talk a little bit about where the food came. I'm going to talk a lot about where the food came from. Locally grown food, home gardens. Some of the people in this room have home gardens. Some people have greenhouses. There's still a fair amount of home gardening going on. Ranches, not so much anymore. And I'm going to talk about some recent local sources, a couple of which are still functioning. Home gardens, here's Wallace McPherson and I believe it's his maternal grandfather, Mr. Raish, the kitchen garden on Paoha Island. In this picture, there are tomatoes, cabbage, beets, onion, and lettuce. This is really one of the better pictures of crops that we've got. Another, for any of you who've been around here long enough and knew Bill Banta or ever got down to see his garden, it was an amazing thing. I used to go down and visit with him, and he just had the most amazing garden. It's almost, part of it's under 395 now. It was across the street from the Lakeview Inn, and on the left here, there was a newspaper article, and he's got a 50-pound banana squash. And then on the right, there's pretty sure it was a staged picture, but boy, he was a great gardener. Ranches in the Mono Basin. I'm not gonna read them all off, but on my lists, if you're interested in looking up a ranch or a particular food item, they're alphabetical, but they're alphabetical from left to right and top to bottom. So you can't just go straight down the columns. A lot of these ranches you'll recognize. Some of the ranches were owned by 2 different people, like the Cremasco Ranch was later owned by Dondero, and Dondero and I think Gardella owned earlier what became part of the DeChambeau Ranch. Who are the ranchers? They were miners who decided they could have a better life farming or homesteading. If you know anything about mining, the people who generally made the money were bankers and investors back east and over in San Francisco. People who came west for a better life and were just lucky enough to end up in the Eastern Sierra. There were a number of men who came to the Mono Basin because they already had family farming here. There were farmers looking for good available land. A number of the Italians came from Genoa down here. And I could go on for about an hour and a half about the quality of the soil and the land around here, and about how there used to be a lot more, let's call it, available water for a number of different reasons. And there were businessmen who became farmers. And at this point, I'm going to tell one of my two farming jokes. People don't, well, it's not a joke, it's a true story. People don't realize how fortunate farmers are. You probably didn't realize farmers only work half days. I don't know any farmer that works much more than a half day. The problem is trying to figure out what to do with the other 12 hours. There's supposed to be a little sign that says laugh, but there you go. Okay, now this is a map of some of the ranches in Mono Basin. I just, now that it's blown up, I noticed that it's got the log cabin mine. It's got Dogtown, which is sort of out of the basin. Monoville is up there, but the ranches are pretty much spread around, and they're pretty much determined by the availability of water. Where did the ranchers come from? We've talked about why they came. Some of them came from Bodie, Lundy, and other mining camps. Several of them were already in California. Many eastern states. Many came from Europe. Specifically Italy, England, Switzerland, and other countries. And there were people who came from Canada. What was grown? There's quite a list of things that was grown here. The what we call winter vegetables or cole crops and root crops. Those aren't any great surprise, but what sort of surprised me were cherries, because if you've ever grown cherries, birds are really hard on cherries. And the melons, the muskmelons, the watermelons, and to a certain extent even the zucchini, because they tend to be relatively sensitive to the environmental conditions, and strawberries, which require a certain amount of water. But almost all of these ranches had gardens for home consumption, and many of them sold vegetables in the mining camps. Lily Matthew was telling me that her grandmother used to take a load of vegetables every once in a while up to Lundy and just sell the vegetables right out of her wagon. Here's some muskmelons at the Clover Ranch. Most of these pictures were taken in the 20s. These are beautiful melons. And when you're looking at these slides, I assume most of you have been in the Mono Basin, and think what you think it looks like, and look at the amount of vegetation in some of these pictures. Here are tomatoes and corn out at the Silvester Ranch. A squash at the Cane Ranch, which was also called the Power Company Ranch. Zucchini at the Comesco or Cramesco Ranch, which was later occupied by, I think, John Dondero. Rhubarb at the Scanavino Ranch. Rhubarb's a pretty amazing plant, and if you can see the guy on the left, he's holding up a stalk of rhubarb, and you can see the leaf at the end of it. That's also known as the Goat Ranch. Turnips, this picture didn't have a location, but it was in with a bunch of pictures from the Clover Ranch. So I sort of suspect it may be from down there. And that is the biggest turnip I have ever seen. Potatoes, the Chris Matley Ranch. I don't know if it was Chris Matley, but apparently one of the Silvesters, it may have been Tom Silvester, and one of the Matleys got in a contest where every year they would see who could grow the biggest potato. And I don't know if you've ever known anybody who is into growing big vegetables, but they take it very seriously. And, you know, that's how some of our new varieties occur. Are created that way, but that's just an interesting story. Here's some apple trees at the Mono Inn. There's still a few of these apple trees down by the cabins. Here's W.D. McPherson on the right. Looks like he's got an armload of potatoes. I was emailing back and forth to Barry. So, and this is his slide from his talk, but I got the slide from him. If anybody has any idea where this is, please let one of us know. The farmhand on the left is holding some other vegetables, and I think they're root crops. I couldn't figure out what they were. I blew up a lot of these pictures, and you can see a fair amount of detail. One thing I'd like you to note in the background, you see that pile of hay. It was a big pile, and we're going to look at another one in a few minutes. Here's beans at the Chris Matley Ranch, pear and apple trees at Filosena Ranch, corn on Paoha Island, McPherson Place. Livestock, they raised chickens for meat and eggs, and they probably stuffed pillows with the feathers. Cows for meat and dairy, goats for meat and dairy, horses, pigs, rabbits, sheep, and turkeys. This is one of the more interesting documents that we've got at the museum. It's a postcard, and the postcard is on the left, the front and back, and I transcribed it on the right. And the postcard is to L.E. Bell Esquire in Bodie, Mono County, California. And it was sent on December 1st from Mono Lake, 1905. And apparently, Mr. Bell had talked to Chris Matley, and Chris Matley conveyed a message to Louis DeChambeau about getting some fresh pork delivered with another order he already had. And this is Louis DeChambeau's postcard confirming the order and saying he'd be up there with it on Monday the 4th. The question mark is because I couldn't tell whether it was the 4th or the 14th. Anyway, this is the only written order for food between Bodie or Lundy and any place else that I came across at the museum. They may have more in Bridgeport or Bodie, but there's only so much time you can spend looking for things. Here, I'm sure many of you have seen this picture out at the ranch. This is our sheep picture showing Kent Norm and Phyllis DeChambeau feeding a lamb. Here's Wally McPherson with a goat out on Paoha Island. And pigs in Clover. It shows up really well. The pigs show up really well on this screen, but at home, if you can't see them, they're pretty much that lump of dark stuff in the middle of the slide. Dairy, we had butter, cheese, cottage cheese, cow's milk, and goat's milk. And this is a dairy probably at the Farrington Ranch. The original picture was labeled with the ID of being the Ney dairy herd, but the mountains in the background indicate it's probably at the Farrington Ranch. Feed for the livestock, they grew alfalfa, clover. They fed forage or crop residue, which had the added benefit of recycling some of the nutrients as the livestock would fertilize the fields with manure. And they grew hay. This is wheat out at the goat ranch. This is wheat, supposedly shoulder high. I have to stop and take a drink. Excuse me. Now, a couple of things I want to talk about here. I don't know if you can see it, but at the base of the haystack, just right of center, there are three little white spots. I think that is the hay press that is still out there at the ranch. And it's got to be a minimum of 4 feet. And it probably in the old days was higher than that. And to the left of the haystack, there's a man standing, and I'm just going to say he's 5. Yeah, right there. I'm just say he's 5 feet, and that makes that haystack a minimum of 18 to 20 feet high, and you can see the hay hoist behind it. So they really piled up a lot of hay. The other interesting thing is that if you'll notice the barn behind the haystack, the roof is open, and they've been using the hay hoist to put hay in the hayloft. And in enlarging this picture, you can see this even less well than you can see the man. There is a metal brace on the side of that barn to help support the weight of the hay. So it's really amazing the amount of work they did in those days. Here's alfalfa in the alfalfa at the DeChambeau Ranch. And for you real history aficionados, the 3 men standing in it are Galbraith, Ryan, and Clover. Here is a load of hay leaving the Conway Ranch, and I have no idea where they were taking it, but they're headed east, so I like to think that they were headed for Bodie with it. Got quite a team of horses on it and quite a load of hay. Wild sources of food. People put up elderberry preserves. Locals hunted and ate and sold geese and ducks. People collected gull eggs. They caught wild trout, and some people ate some of the wild onions. This guy is standing in the picture. He's got a really serious shotgun. I figure there's between 8 and 12 ducks wrapped around his neck, and that was one shot with his shotgun. That was a serious shotgun, and there were a lot of ducks. There are stories in the Chesapeake Bay. This isn't really a Mono Basin story. They had guns that had barrels that were like 12 feet long, and they could kill 100 ducks with one shot. And they would supply markets in New York City. And again, that doesn't have anything to do with Mono Basin, but it's kind of interesting because I don't think you get away with having a shotgun quite that large today. Here's trout at a fish fry at Mark Twain Days. Trout were often caught in Lundy and sold in Bodie. I love these old stories. I'm a bit of a trivia freak, which you will learn by the end of the program. The first one is a bag of rocks was stolen in Bodie. And this is a great story. A local farmer would take his produce to Bodie, and one day he was in a store making a sale, and somebody stole a bag of potatoes out of the back of his wagon. And I imagine this probably happened more than once. So he decided to take a bag of rocks and leave it at the back of his wagon. And lo and behold, wouldn't you know it, it got stolen. So some of these thieves are persistent, but not terribly bright. And then this great story, the Scanavinos were besmirched by a Bodie newspaper, and they got really upset. I wasn't able to get the original article from the Bodie paper, but there was a report of the Scanavinos refusing to feed somebody who was traveling between Bodie and Lundy on snowshoe at the tail end of a big snowstorm. And traveling by snowshoe in the middle of the winter was one of the main ways people got around. And in those days, you really didn't refuse to feed people, but the reporter in Bodie bungled the story. And he really screwed it up, and he reported that they had refused to feed this guy. And the Scanavinos, I don't know if they took out an ad in the paper or just printed up little placards, but they refuted the story, and the guy who were they supposed to have not fed supported them. And it was, quite the brouhaha. This was reported in the Homer Mining Index. And I'm sure this all stands up very well. It's in the newspaper. The next one, I think you got to take with a grain of salt. The following week, the same paper, the Homer Mining Index, reported that the Italians at the Goat Ranch have procured guns to ensure that no man shall pass their place without stopping and being fed. I read a whole year's worth or more of the Homer Mining Index, and there's some really good stuff in there, but some of it you don't really know how much of it to believe. But it was a good story. So recent local sources of food. The four that I list here are the Community Garden, Joe Supa, Joel Ellis and Kristie Nelson up at the Simus Ranch, and Sierra Bounty. The Community Garden, Eileen started that in 1998. It's the Lee Vining School and Community Garden. If you haven't been there, it's well worth visiting, although it might not be too spiffy looking right now because things are just starting to grow around the basin. It's in its 25th year, and its goal was to increase access for all residents to nutritious, organically local grown fresh produce. And it also works with the Lee Vining High School as a demonstration project for students, teachers, and community members, and to research the most sustainable practices for reviving local food production. The community garden part of it is struggling a little bit right now, but the teaching part is going great guns. Todd Wanaker is starting up, I think this week, a program with high school students at the garden, and anybody who's interested in participating in the community garden or anything else can either contact Beth Long at the library or Rose Nelson at the Mono Lake Committee. Joe Supa has been growing really delicious tomatoes for many years, and hopefully he's recovered enough and will continue to. The Simus Ranch, Joel Ellis and Kristie Nelson, they had farm boxes and sold local produce for almost 10 years. There's some pictures here. These are my other color pictures. This is a list of what they grew, and I was looking at it this morning and trying to figure out what's on this list that I was pretty sure wouldn't have been grown in the 1880s. And I can't really be sure of any of this, but I would suspect maybe arugula, kohlrabi, maybe cilantro, and I don't know about kale or radicchio. But almost all of the farmers here were from different ethnic and social groups, so any of these crops could have been grown. But if any of you had any of this produce, it was really good food. Sierra Bounty is not exactly local, although Joel and Kristie provided a good chunk of their food some years. It provided farm boxes, community-supported agriculture from 2010 until 2019. The food was produced all the way, I think, from Lone Pine to the Mono Basin. And I'm going to move on to food shipped into the basin. And I don't think I've ever done a slideshow where once I got it finalized and I couldn't make any changes, I thought, oh, you left a slide out. And the slide I left out of this one is the Panem Pantry, which was an organization, or a group, I should say, that was started by Harriet Hess sometime, I think, in the 1980s, where they would make a bulk order of food from, I believe it was a co-op called the Mountain People, and they would get a large, oh, thank you, Rich to the rescue. Thanks. I have a drinking problem. If I don't drink a lot of water, my throat goes dry. They would get the food delivered. I think originally it came to Harriet's house where Paul McFarland lives now, and then they would divide it up. Later, it went to the fire station, and there were many local families involved in that. Yep. I thought somebody was asking a question. So food shipped into the basin, items that could not be produced locally, like saltwater fish, oranges, bananas, were shipped in, usually by freight wagons, later by truck. And this would include things like fresh vegetables during the winter. Merchants would quickly establish businesses as soon as it looked like there was money to be made in the camp. Capitalism really worked well in those days. Well, this was fascinating. In the 1880s, Wells Fargo would express ship fruit and other perishables to Bodie. I think this was from San Francisco for $6 a pound. So just like when we get to Hammond Store and the Pioneer Cash Store, everything you want under one roof, this is basically overnight delivery, 1880s style. I don't know that a lot of it was shipped in because $6 a pound was an awful lot of money. But the fact that it was available is really interesting. This little snippet from the Mono Alpine Chronicle earned 2 red asterisks, and I think the article is accurate, except I don't think the shipments were daily, because they claim that leaving Mormon Station daily were wagons with 60,000 board feet of lumber, 15 loads of freight, 12 to 15 loads of fruit and vegetables, and quite a number of teams with chickens, turkeys, geese, ducks, and pigs. So maybe not daily, but it did show that even that early, there was a lot of freight moving toward Bodie. Speaking of shipping things into the basin, Bill Banta seems to show up quite a bit in this slideshow. This picture was undated. I think it's probably the late 20s or early 30s. He had a truck, and he would bring produce up from Bishop and possibly Point South, and he would deliver it to Lee Vining, Lundy, Bodie. He went to June Lake, any place where people would buy it. And there's various produce in this load, but what is readily identifiable are the watermelons. And on the side of his truck hanging from the mirror is his bedroll. He was a real go-getter. This is a partial list of foods imported into the basin. Some of them are pretty obvious. You don't grow oranges or coffee or oysters around here. The ones with the little red stars next to them are things that were imported, but were also probably produced locally. I mentioned that I was a real trivia nut. I came across this market report, and it listed the price of butter, 50 cents a pound. It was 45 cents a pound if you bought a whole roll, and they didn't specify how big a roll was, but it was only 37.5 cents a pound if you bought a firkin. Does anybody know what a firkin is? No? Well, it turns out a firkin is a quarter of a barrel, and its legal description was, well, for butter at least, its physical description, it was 56 pounds of butter. So the fact that they were advertising it must mean they felt somebody would buy it, or maybe they would just cut it up if they didn't. But it probably would go to a restaurant or a group of people buying it together. 56 pounds of butter is a lot of butter. Here's the Lee Vining Market with Bill Banta, Joe Merrill, and Harry Flavor standing outside of it in 1939. The Lee Vining Markets, there's really only 2 of them. What started out as the Lee Vining Meat Market was started by Bob Curry, and he had cattle up in Lee Vining Canyon. He also grew some vegetables, so he would sell cabbage and other vegetables at the meat market. Eventually became the Lee Vining Home Bakery and the Lee Vining Market, and eventually became the Mono Market. Bob Curry sold it to Bill Banta. Bill Banta ran it for several years, then sold it to Harry Blaver, who sold it to Mario Barcy, who sold it to Chris Lisa, who sold it to Sam, the current owner. And then there's Hammonds, and we'll get to Hammonds in a few minutes. Here's a picture of the Lee Vining Meat Market, and according to one report I read, at least one of the walls is still inside that building, but they said it's pretty much nothing but sawdust now. Here's a lead. This is obviously at a later date from the looks of that truck, the Lee Vining Meat Market truck. This is the Calhoun Store and Bakery. Bill Calhoun started it around 1930. This has an interesting history. I don't know about the building itself, but the location is where Nicely's Market now is, and you can pretty much follow a chain of businesses from the store and bakery to Nicely's Market, and we'll look at that in a few minutes. Here's the Lee Vining Home Bakery and the Lee Vining Market. A lot of the slides you're seeing were determined by what was available, and this is what we've got. And there's some great car pictures and truck pictures in here. Here's the Mono Market more recently. Moving on to Bodie, there were several markets in Bodie over the years. The businesses depended on the mining. The mining was very cyclical and boom and bust. Some of the markets barely lasted a year. Some of them lasted for several years. In 1878, there were 6 markets advertised in the local newspaper. They also had butcher shops and bakeries. The type of produce being advertised: fresh cranberries, Swiss cheddar, Limburger cheese, goose and jelly, French mushrooms, celery salt, and gilt edge butter. I have no idea what gilt edge butter is, but it sure sounds good. The markets also sold bananas, apricots, strawberries, oranges, oysters, clams, as well as local apples, pears, cherries, and strawberries. You notice strawberries show up twice there. Here's the Lewis and Belle Murphy Meat Market in Bodie. You can see hams and I think slabs of bacon hanging on the wall. And there's, I don't know if it's a lamb or a small steer skinned out on the right side of the table there. This was in the early 1900s. Lundy Markets, the Pioneer Cash Store, which I believe was one of the longest lasting stores in Lundy. This is literally the Walmart of 1880. They were advertising dress goods, Yankee notions, boots, shoes, hats and caps, wallpaper, cutlery, lamps, patent medicines, and for this talk, groceries and provisions, a large assortment of canned goods and candies and nuts. Also the finest brands of wines, liquor, and tobacco, and Havana cigars. So this one shop stopping is nothing new. There were several other markets, and these lists of markets are not comprehensive. They're just sort of a snapshot of what I could fit on the page. Fine fruit. Sometimes food would just show up. Hugh Quinn of Chinese Camp was in, this is out of the Homer Mining Index, was in town last Sunday with a load of such fine fruit as only the foothills of California can produce. He had great bunches of luscious grapes, enormous pears, and huge apples. Besides, he had a quantity of delicious wine made on his own ranch. They really knew how to write newspaper copy in those days. Ice cream in Lundy? Sure, why not? Again, the Homer Mining Index, 1880, July 10th. Matt Elliott and John Stryker spent most of the 4th of July making and serving ice cream to the people attending the celebration. Now, I've got a July 4th celebration picture here, but it's from 1900. But it fits, so I put it in. And Matt Elliott and Ben McKnight had 200 tons of ice stored at the lower end of the lake. This is in July. So they did have refrigeration after a manner. I don't think people call them ice boxes today, but most of the people watching this probably grew up calling refrigerator ice boxes. And there was a reason for that, because their parents grew up with ice boxes. Hammond's store. This is Hammond's store in 1905. Jack Hammond acquired the toll. Could you uncap my water, please? Well, I got a whole new career for you. No doubt. Acquired the toll road. What's now 395 in those days was the toll road. He had a store. He sold dry goods, groceries, and whiskey. Now, whiskey's interesting. It shows up in almost all these lists, so it must have been a staple. But also, one of the things historically, I'm not sure it was as big a deal here, but it may have been. In the olden days, drinking beer and alcohol was a lot safer than drinking water. Because if you drank water, you could pick up some horrible diseases. But I think they probably liked whiskey just to get a little tipsy. Anyway, he sold a lot of things in the store, and he also bartered with local people. The Hammond Ledger, which is a wealth of information, has a report in 1909 of Mrs. Filosena trading potatoes, carrots, and other vegetables for overalls, candles, tobacco, and chimney lamps. And I went through the ledger. I had delusions of grandeur, what I was going to do with all this information. And then I realized there was a lot more information than there was time. But just in the month of April in 1909, there were, in the ledger, there was recorded sales of ham, bacon, flour, raisins, dried apples, macaroni, rice, beans, sugar, tobacco, whiskey, coffee, tomatoes, salt, chow chow, which was a real big seller, and apparently it was a relish that was really popular in those days, rolled oats, and chocolate. So he had quite a business going there, and he was in business for several years. He eventually sold to the Cunninghams in the 1920s, and the Hammond store morphed into Tioga Lodge. Yes, Tioga Lodge, right? Okay. And Cunningham sold it to the Hathaways, and Gloria Ma ended up with it by 1988. And I don't know who the newest owner is, but this doesn't really have a lot to do with food in the Mono Basin. But since I was on the topic, this picture of Tioga Lodge before the 1954 flood is just amazing. The road in the middle is what's now 395. So it was really a big operation. Grocery shopping today. Most grocery shopping is done out of the basin and involves quite a bit of driving. And that asterisk there would allow me, if I had another 2 hours, to go on a rant about the use of energy and the idea that we're saving money by driving to Reno to shop at Costco, and we don't include the price of gas, the wear and tear on the car, or the carbon dioxide input to the environment, which loops back to the community garden and the original ranchers. We could be doing a lot more. And I was talking to one of the local people, and they were wondering why there wasn't more farming in the Mono Basin or in Mono County. And I think on a commercial basis, it has to do with a lack of water, which I think has been pretty well explained. But locally in our homes, most of us could do a little more growing. It's a lot of work, but it's very satisfying. If you've never gardened, you ought to start. And I'm editorializing now. So let's look at some restaurants. The big thing in those days were chop stands. And I was talking to Priscilla this afternoon, and I realized that's probably the equivalent of a fast food place in the 1880s. And basically you went in there and you got a slab of meat cooked up. But there in Bodie, there was the United States Bakery and Chop Stand, the Can, which advertised game, poultry, fish, and oysters, and they never closed. The Parlor Chop Stand, vegetables and fruit in season, fresh oysters and eggs. And the Rifle Club Rotisserie added to the mix fresh saltwater fish. And again, this is just a sampling of the restaurant in Bodie. Restaurants in Lundy, the Gem Chop Stand. I love this for in part for the use of the word cookery. They had fish, game, the choicest cuts of meat served up in the highest style of cookery. Again, they never closed. The Lake House Hotel had fruits, ice cream, and iced fruits. There was a fair amount of variety. This Vincent's restaurant was formerly Mrs. Nunau's. That just shows that the restaurant may have stayed there, but the owner and the cooks might have changed. Again, this is just a partial list. Restaurants in Levining. There was the Epic. There was Kellogg's, which is now the Tioga Baking Company, which pretty much just bakes bread for Nicely's. There's the Mono Cone, which just opened this week. There's the Mono Inn, which fortunately has been open most of the winter. The Nevada Restaurant, which is the predecessor of Bodie Mike's. Nicely's, which is going to open next week, I believe, and the Whoa Nelly Deli, which will open probably when the Pass opens. Nicely's is interesting because, as I mentioned earlier, it started out as the Calhoun Grocery and Bakery. And then Bill Calhoun opened Says Bill's Cafe. Now, this is a really interesting place for a number of reasons. His sort of signature meal was a steak sandwich, and the steak sandwich consisted of 2 steaks stuffed with onions between them. So it was literally a steak sandwich. He was a real go-getter. He had the first post office in Levining. I think previously the post office had been down at Hammond's. He had a barber chair. He had some groceries. So he had his finger in several different pies. Then he sold Julio, had Julio's Cafe. He sold the Nicely's. The Nicely's sold to the Pinizados, who kept the Nicely's name. The reason some of these have more information is I'm hoping maybe in the next 30 years to write this all up. I have a wild imagination. Okay, and here's a picture of Julio's in 1953. And sometimes I just write what's on the photo. And I think R. Lewis is the person who took the photo. So Julio's is where Nicely's is now. Nevada Cafe to the right is where Bodie Mike's is. And this is officially the last slide of my food in the Mono Basin talk. But wait, there's more. I have 2 more slides. I told you I like trivia and I like nosing around and finding stuff. And I was reading the oral histories. I read several of them when I first started this project. And I we've all heard about Mark Twain Days and all the activities they had at Mark Twain Days. And I don't remember if I knew this then, but one of the activities was rock drilling. And I had never given a lot of thought. I'm reading this oral history with Don and guess who? Bill Banta. And I don't know if it was Emily Strauss or who, the interviewer said, well, tell us about some of the wild characters. And they got going about this Betancourt guy and a local Indian whose name they couldn't remember, who were a drilling team. And they won almost every contest. They made a big deal. Oh, yeah, these mining companies from Goldfield and they would send their drillers over here, and one guy would hold the drill bit, the other guy would hammer, and then they would trade off, and they would drill through 2 feet of granite quite quickly. And then they sort of, Bill Banta offhandedly mentioned, well, the last drilling contest they ever had, they were unable or forgot to move a piece of granite to the Mono end. So they went up 120 and they did the drilling up there. And he said, you can go up there and you can see the rock they drilled in. Has anybody seen that rock? I'm going to show it to you. I drove by it regularly for 30 years. And this rock is about a quarter mile west of the old Forest Service station. It's on the north side of the road. It's about 60, 70 feet off the road, and it's about 6 feet tall. So it's a big rock. You can see this from the road. And there's still a drill bit in the second hole from the left. You can see the shadow. There's still a drill bit in it. So this is a little Mono Basin Historical Society trivia. I've got more, which I hope to dribble out over the next several years, but I've got one more for you tonight. This, if you can see it, is a slab of cement. It says built 1940 by Supervisor Joe Scanavino. This is on the north side of the bridge on the, I don't know, it's Rattlesnake Creek. It's a creek that comes out of Bridgeport Canyon. So the bridge is just west of the Goat Ranch in that dip before you go up to the road. I don't know if it says the same thing on the south side because it's very brushy in there, but I don't think anybody ever seen this. Well, thank you, Priscilla. So, there are all sorts of interesting things in the Mono Basin that are just waiting to be discovered. They're not going anywhere, and I'm sure many of us will never discover most of them. Anyway, that's the end of my talk. Thank you. Any questions?
Yes, we do have a number of them on the screen.
Oh my goodness.
Quite a few. You read that?
Not really. I take my glasses off.
Yeah.
Can you read it?
Okay, let's bring this back to me here. Let's turn on my microphone. The
Testing. Okay. Jan Lepouvier says, any ill will or discrimination cast upon those European farmers or ranchers who settled in the Mono Basin among the existing Californians? Is there pushback?
Not that I'm immediately aware of, because many of the people had names like Scanavino and Dondero and DeChambeau, and they were the ones that were here. I think there's probably always a little bit of discrimination between us and them, but it never came up as an issue in any of the information I came across in those days. It may have become more of an issue more recently, but not for what I was doing.
Art Langley asks, what happened to all the barns and ranch houses in the basin?
Many of them were stolen. Literally, people came in, they stripped everything out of the inside. A number of them have fallen down, and you can still find parts of them. The Filosena Ranch, the Silvester Ranch, the Sam Ranch, DeChambeau, and the Goat Ranch still have buildings in various degree of disrepair or arrested decay. Some of them probably burned down. I know there were some buildings on LA. I think there were some buildings on Los Angeles Department of Power and Water property that were burnt down. I know they had planned on burning down the schoolhouse, but some local people got together and saved that.
Barry McPherson says the photo of little Wally McPherson with the goat on Paoha Island was about 1920, not 1927. He was born in 1914 and looks to be about 6 years old in the photo. McPherson's moved to the West Shore around 1921. And he continues, trout were introduced to the fishless Mono Basin, but Lahontan cutthroat trout were native to the Bridgeport area. They were in the Walker River Basin, abundant in Walker Lake before settlers ever arrived. Sanford's iPad.
Wait, was that the end of Barry's
Yeah,
comment?
there's no question in there.
Okay, well, I'm going to turn it into a question, or I'm going to turn it into an answer. The Homer Mining Index had several articles in the year 1880 lamenting the fact that the completion of the milling of the May Lundy mine would pollute the streams and the water would run into the lake and kill all the trout. So this is not a new problem. It's not a new issue, and it's not something people were unaware of. It didn't directly have any bearing on my talk, but since Barry brought up trout, I thought I'd throw it in.
There's a comment from Sanford's iPad. Our favorite part of the food history in the Mono area is the refrigerator tufa. Our grandkids love visiting there.
I had a picture of that, but I wasn't quite sure how to work it into the talk. Apparently, the Nays had a dairy there, and I believe probably the spring that was involved in building that tufa was still flowing in those days, so there was cold water coming up that was helping keeping that cold. But that was a good question.
Eileen, thanks for plugging the Lee Vining School and Community Garden. It's still happening and welcomes community volunteers and student mentors.
I love gardens, period.
Patricia Rakowski, where is Mormon Station?
Mormon Station, I know it's what we now call Genoa in Nevada. And if that's not quite good enough, it's a little bit north and west of Gardnerville and Minden.
Art Langley asks about where did the ice come from to keep things cold?
Well, the ice that I mentioned that was being stored at the base of Lundy Lake was cut out of Lundy Lake. I don't know how they would have gotten tons of ice to Bodie, but I'm sure people worked at it.
Barry McPherson comments that the diversity of produce and other foods is surprising, and thanks for the info.
I was amazed myself. it just kept finding more and more.
Steve Moore, as I recall from my research, there was an ice house in Bodie, and there was still some sawdust there during my time in the 70s. I seem to remember blocks of ice being taken from some of the frozen lakes around the Mono Basin in the winter.
It's good to know.
And Barry chimes in, yes, June Lake was definitely a source of block ice, big blocks. Clay Brandow, did pine nuts collected locally show up in the miners and their families' diets?
I'm sure to a certain extent they did. I didn't get into native food sources intentionally, but there was a fair amount of interaction between the natives and the miners. It probably tapered off as the native people lost more and more of the land.
Emily Strauss, wow, definitely have seen that mystery rock. I remember interviewing Don B. about wildlife. I think Eileen also interviewed him, but I don't remember asking about the wild characters. Glad someone did. Great talk, Cole. And following more accolades from Chris Spiller and our Langley, where is that concrete structure built in the 40s?
Pardon me?
Where? There was an audio problem through here. Would you repeat where the concrete structure was that was labeled for in the 1940s?
Oh,
Is
the
Scanavino?
bridge.
Yes.
Yeah, it's the bridge over the creek that comes out of Bridgeport Canyon, and it's on the Goat Ranch Road, just, 3/4 of a mile from the ranch, if that much. Yeah. You can't miss it, but you got to sort of climb down a bank through wild roses to see it.
All righty. Is that all the questions and comments? Okay. Thank you so much, Cole. That was awesome. Thank you very much. And folks, thank you for attending. Next month, May 2nd, I believe, is the first Monday of the month. And David Woodruff is going to give us another one of his talks. I'm not sure the actual title, but I'm sure it'll be a rousing tale along the Camino Sierra. So thank you all very much for attending, and we'll see you next month. Thank you.